Yo, what's going on, guys? Watomarmelon here today, and today I'm going to be talking about problems with modern Yu-Gi-Oh card collecting. Most of these problems are caused by Konami, and it might be surprising that I'm talking about this given my most recent videos about what I'm collecting in terms of modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but I'm going to show off some of my modern cards. I'm going to show off some of my recent pickups, which are not modern per se. I think there's one that is modern, but this is a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. I actually wrote out notes on this. I normally, I'm just talking straight from the head. I don't plan anything out in advance, but I did actually write down some notes on this. Not too many, but this is something that I really wanted to talk about. So hopefully you guys enjoy. I might, do my usual scatterbrained approach where I talk about some of the cards I'm showing off. But there are going to be fewer cards today, and it's going to be more about what I'm actually saying. So my main problem with modern card collecting and what Konami is actually doing has to do with collector rares and starlight rares. These are the two high rarities that Konami is using in modern Yu-Gi-Oh collecting. And what I will say is that I really do appreciate that Konami is actually caring about collectors. There's a period of time starting with or ending after Dimension of Chaos. So Dimension of Chaos was the last core set to have ghost rares in it. And after that, they stopped printing ghost rares for a long time. Obviously, with Rage of Ra, they started printing them again in modern cards, but they stopped after Dimension of Chaos, and they didn't really have a chase rarity until Starlights were introduced in, I think, Rising Rampage. So there was this long span, many years where there wasn't really much to chase after if you were a modern Yu-Gi-Oh card collector. Obviously, there are secret rares, and there were some ultimate rares and OTS packs, but there wasn't a whole lot going on. So I do appreciate that Konami is actually, spending more time trying to cater towards collectors. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that players are taken care of. This card game will survive if there isn't really much collecting going on. It won't survive if all the people trying to play the card game don't play anymore. And this is coming from a collector who does not play. I recognize that collecting is secondary to playing. However, it feels bad when you're a collector and they don't really do anything to cater to you. But the stuff they're doing nowadays, I was really happy when they introduced collector rares back in 2020 with Toon Chaos. They were a huge hit when they first came out. Starlight rares obviously are still very, very huge, but the recent introduction of quarter century rares and sort of this idea that Starlight rares might be getting devalued has a lot of collectors talking about modern Yu-Gi-Oh card collecting, where it's going, where it's been. And so the two main problems I have with what Konami has done is the first one being that I think their choices of collector rares and Starlight rares have not been great. And this is a subjective opinion, but I'll qualify it by saying that I don't like when Konami reprints cards that have other modern high rarity printings, or cards that really are not popular enough to warrant printings of these modern high rarities when they have sort of a mid rarity, or their original print was high rarity and they're not too expensive a card. And I'll provide some examples for this as the video goes on. So the first problem is, the cards that they're actually printing, and also what they're not printing in collector rare and starlight rare, because it's not like there aren't enough good choices for these rarities. It's just Konami is not picking them for whatever reason, and that's a little bit frustrating as a collector. The second thing is that these collector rares and starlight rares, I feel like they don't really have much of an identity. I thought when they first came out there was a little bit more defined an identity of what these cards were, and nowadays I feel that it's been a bit lost. And so where do these rarities stand with respect to other rarities? Is the collector rare supposed to be a mid rarity like secret rare nowadays, or is it supposed to be a high rarity? They do things that sometimes make it feel like a mid rarity and sometimes make it feel like a high rarity. Certainly it's difficult enough to pull any specific collector rare that the cards are rare enough for them to be high rarity, but given some of the choices, they really don't feel like high rarity cards. And then starlight rares, are these just supposed to be upgrades of, when they do these vintage upgrades, are these supposed to be, the highest rarity printing given how difficult they are to pull? Or are they just meant to be a modern chase that really doesn't compare to previous vintage printings. Also, why are they printing the same cards, for example, Starlight Rare in Collector Rare and or excuse me, Stardust Dragon in Collector Rare and Starlight Rare? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why are you making these rarities compete against each other? If you have one modern high rarity, what's the point of printing it in both of these? Is Collector Rare supposed to be, the accessible high rarity version, whereas Starlight Rare is the inaccessible one? What are you doing here? It's not clear what Konami's going after. And so right now we're kind of in a state where it's uncertain where these rarities are going, especially given the quarter century secret rare, which I forgot. I should have brought out one of my quarter century secret rares. Actually, no, I won't go get it, but I do have some of the 20th anniversary secret rares, which are going to be more or less identical to the new quarter century secret rare. They weren't released in English, but they were released in Japanese, and it looks like we're just sort of copying what was done on the Japanese side. So, moving on, I'll flip my page of notes. And so, if you continuously print a modern card in the same, or in these new rarities, for example, Stardust Dragon is getting a printing in basically every rarity, you can't expect people to chase after each one of these printings. It's just not feasible. People get tired of having the same cards printed over and over again. And that seems to be, you have Trishula, for example, and I actually have a Trishula on hand. Do I have anything else I want to show? But I have a Trishula on hand right here. So this is a card that was first printed in dual terminal ultra rare. It's very hard to get, and that was originally thought to be the high rarity. Then they gave it an ultimate rare, which is this version out of Astral Pack 8. And this is obviously a very coveted version of the card. But they recently, or not recently, but in 2021 in Blazing Vortex, they give it a Starlight Rare. And so it sort of puts this card, this is not a playable card in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't think, at least. And so it's a card that, you wonder, where does it stand? Why is there this new Starlight Rare? Are these older Ultimate Rare versions supposed to compete with that Starlight Rare? Naturally, they're going to. But it didn't feel like a card that was still being played so much and people were being priced out of these vintage versions. Where does this card stand with respect to the modern Starlight Rare? Are there not better options for the, reprint Starlight Rares? For example, Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. That one is a card that obviously is not seeing any play. It doesn't really have any super high rarity printing. It obviously has the original print secret rare, but it doesn't have an ultimate rare or a ghost rare or a Starlight or collector's rare. And so that seems like a natural choice for a card that people would really want to collect, but isn't going to compete with other versions of the card. And so there are other options that you can pick. So I'll switch binders out to show other options and other examples of things where they're sort of competing with other modern versions. So the first pick first one that I wanted to talk about is Scapegoat. This is a card this is now a $17 card, really not expensive in the least bit. Still a card that I think looks quite good. It's not a bad looking card. It has an interesting foiling pattern, although I wouldn't say it's the best. This was printed in, I'm honestly forgetting the set now. I might have written it down. I think it was Tactical Masters, but it was printed, I think, in 2022 in Collector Rare. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense because Scapegoat has it has a secret rare printing, has an original print super rare, so that's not really that important, as in a retro pack 1 ultra rare, so that's sort of the ultra high rarity that most people are not going to get their hands on. But you still have this mid rarity version of the card. So it kind of made sense when, in 2018, they printed Scapegoat in Ultimate Rare. And Scapegoat Ultimate Rare, I think, was a welcome addition. It's not like this card was super playable at all. But it's still, a fine card to print in something like Ultimate Rare. It looks quite nice. Makes sense. But this card was printed in 2018. Okay, fine. It has a high rarity printing in Ultimate Rare. But then they go back and print it in Collector Rare. And it really makes you wonder, what was the point? Why did you print that? This card really holds not much value. but it's not cheap enough that people that are really looking for good-looking collection pieces on a pretty tight budget, they're not going to be able to pick this up for almost $20. They're going to be looking at the Secret Rare, which looks quite nice and I think is a $5 card. Now, I understand it was more expensive before the Collector Rare printing, but still, it really, begs the question, what was the point of printing this? There are other cards that are more deserving of a Collector Rare or a Starlight Rare printing. For example, Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight. This is something that had a printing out of Dragons of Legend in, I believe, 2013 and Secret Rare that doesn't have one of these modern high rarity printings. And so it begs the question, why are you not reprinting that card, but you're reprinting something like Scapegoat? And neither of those cards, I believe, are playable cards in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's just a question of, what are you doing? Obviously, Stardust Dragon is one that we've talked about already. This card has a printing in basically every rarity. Has an original print Ghost Rare, Ultimate Rare, and Ultra Rare. It has a tin Secret Rare. There's like a premium, or there's like a gold rare. So there are tons of rarities of this card, and they printed it in Collector's Rare and Toon Chaos. Okay, fine. There's a modern high rarity printing, and then they reprint it in Starlight Rare. And obviously, people love the Starlight Rare, but it leaves the Collector Rare in a weird position where this is a difficult card to pull, difficult card to get your hands on, especially at a Toon Chaos. But what are they actually doing? I don't really know. It's very popular, but I don't think it's playable in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And so I don't know if there's enough of a collector's market to sort of consume all of this. Additionally, I feel like there are other cards that are more deserving. And then you go to something like King's Court, where you have cards like Queen's Knight. Queen's Knight is a cool card. I like it. I think the Collector Rare looks awesome. But it has this original print Ultimate Rare. And so, this isn't a playable card. This is not a card that has enough demand that people are going to be, they've been looking for a high rarity printing of the card. They haven't been able to get it due to price concerns. Now you print this Collector Rare, which is very difficult to pull, this specific one, and say, okay, we've printed this new high rarity. Well, there wasn't really a need for it. There was this original print Ultimate Rare, which is still pretty accessible, and now you've used up a slot for the Queen's Knight Collector Rare. And there were cards from the same set that I thought would have been better choices, namely the Wicked Gods. So I think that's like the Wicked Dreadroot, Avatar, all those cards I think only had Shonen Jump Ultra Rare printings and would have looked incredible in Collector's Rare, and collectors would have wanted to get them. So it makes me a little bit confused that they printed all three. So I have the three Ultimate Rares right here. And then I have the three Collector Rares right here. And the Ultimate Rares are still very accessible. Now I have unlimited versions of the card. The first edition is going to be a little bit more difficult to get your hands on, but it's not that hard to get the Ultimate Rares, especially considering the unlimited cards in near mint cost less money than the Collector Rares do. So it's not like, it's super hard to get your hands on. Another example is Solemn Judgment Collector Rare that had an Ultra Rare, a Ghost Rare, two Secret Rares, and then in 2019, almost 2020, they released OTS 12, which had Solemn Judgment as a collector, as an Ultimate Rare. And then 3 years later, they printed it as a Collector Rare. And I think that was out of the most recent Maze of Memories set. And so it's just like, what are you doing? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense when there are cool cards. And it's not like all the choices have been bad. You have cards like Arcana Triumph Joker. They should be focusing on new releases like these, which they have done a pretty good job. This is a really nice card, beautiful card. Very happy that they did print it in Collector Rare. And then they also have some other interesting prints, something like Rescue Rabbit. It's a cool card, not really super playable in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but it still, I believe, can be played a little bit, and it's an interesting collector's rare. That, to me, makes a lot more sense than printing other cards that have no playable qualities to them, but still are getting these high rarity printings. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There are other ones like Venomenaga, which I don't think was really deserving of a collector rare. It doesn't have a modern high rarity printing. It's a beautiful collector rare, but I don't think there was ever really the demand for this card. in sort of the collector rare printing. But beautiful card, and I love it a lot. Just, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that they did that. And then furthermore, we can move on. This is a good choice in Torrential Tribute, but we move on to something like, for example, Utopia. Now this is actually the Japanese version, but it's Astral language, so it looks basically the same thing. They printed this in this essentially Astral language Starlight Rare, but they also printed an Ultimate Rare, and then they also printed a Collector Rare out of King's Court. I forget the exact timeline of, I think this one was printed first, then it was the Collector Rare, then the Ultimate Rare. Regardless, why are you printing the same card in 3 modern high rarities? It just doesn't make sense. And so you have a card that is essentially a from the show, one of the boss monsters, an Ultimate Rare, worth $20. It just doesn't make sense what they're doing. So, you know, I think it's also damaging because it's like, okay, you buy the, you chase after the Astral Language Starlight Rare, and then they print it in 2 other high rarities, and now your chase for that Starlight Rare wasn't worth as much as you thought it was because they just went around and reprinted it immediately in these other high rarities. Or if you went after the Collector Rare, they then printed an Ultimate Rare, which presumably is a higher rarity, and it's still very accessible. And so it sucks as a collector because you don't know what to chase after, because they might just go around and, you know, say, okay, we're reprinting this thing. It doesn't really need a reprint, but we're doing it anyway. And as I said, there are cards like Dark Magician Girl the Dragonite that get these high rarity printings, or that haven't gotten these high rarity printings, that I think people would enjoy high rarity printings of. And when you look at stuff like the OCG, there are cards that I think would be fun printings in the TCG. For example, you have XYZ Dragon Cannon. That's a fun one. You have cards in core sets. For example, this Neos. I think this is Shining Neos or Divine Neos. No, it's not Divine Neos. I think it's Shining Neos Wingman, something like that. This got an ultra rare, I believe, in the TCG, and didn't get any collectible printing to it. I think this is one that Neos collectors would have been looking for in something like a Starlight Rare, but it only got that in the OCG and didn't get it in the TCG. And so it really begs the question, what was going on? There are some okay choices. For example, the Exodia pieces I think were fine choices, and I'm happy that they did get the Starlight Rare, but you know, I don't know where they were going with some of the other ones in the same set. They have that Blackwing card. I understand that Blackwing's got support, but it really just seemed out of place. And then obviously Ghost from the Past 2, I think, was a bit of a train wreck. And I've talked about this, you know, ad nauseum on my second channel, but it doesn't really make sense to make such a stacked lineup of Ghost Rares. You have cards like Cyber Dragon and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon in these Ghost Rares, right? Alongside Blue Eyes White Dragon, Red Eyes Black Dragon, Dark Magician Girl, you know, the list goes on and on. They're just Dark Arm Dragon. There are so many bangers. And the problem is there's too much of a good thing. You put all these in one set and you print the set into oblivion. Now you can't print these cards in other high rarities because they're just going to be devalued. And that it sort of devalues the rarity or the desirability, if that's a word, of Ghost Rares, because you've sort of printed them into the ground. Everyone has their hands on their favorite Ghost Rare. Why are you going to chase after something like a Collector Rare version of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon when it has a Ghost Rare that's super, super cheap? I think Konami is shooting themselves in the foot a bit with some of the recent choices. So I'd be interested to know what you guys thought. I realize this ended up being a bit more scatterbrained than I originally intended. It's a 20-minute video. If you enjoyed this, let me know. Just me kind of ranting into a mic. I didn't think it was going to be that, but I guess I always regress back to what I actually am, just a ranter. So it's been your boy Watomarmelon. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, and peace out.